Wonderful. Well, today is my honor and pleasure to have Florian Heinemann on the show. Florian is an extremely experienced entrepreneur, started companies, invested in companies, is one of the core guys from the Berlin ecosystem, kind of that made Berlin to what we know now as one of the core hubs in Europe for entrepreneurship. Florian, so great to have you on the show today.
Thanks a lot for having me.
Wonderful. Well, could you tell us a bit? Oh, there are many people out there wondering, well, what would be my way through life? And so can you tell me a little bit about, or us a bit about your way into the entrepreneurship area?
Mhm. Yeah, it was kind of by accident, and I guess that's why. So it was not basically that my father was an entrepreneur and I always wanted to be an entrepreneur all my life or something like that. That was really by accident. That I was at a great business school back then, WHU. That was very entrepreneurial in a way, not because the school per se was so entrepreneurial. Actually, it is also quite entrepreneurial, but it was actually because there were a couple of people that started to found internet companies like from 97, 98 on, and I graduated in 1999, and actually in that year. A third of my class, we were like 70 people, but roughly a third, I think from 70 people, 21 founded an internet startup. Yeah, so I mean that was kind of the first wave, and I finished university or back then as a Diplom-Kaufmann still with like 23.
It's a
And so
business degree, no?
Yeah, business was like the German business, like the old school business degree. And I thought I'm 23, I have nothing to lose. And normally I wanted to become a research assistant. That was my original plan. And I think that kind of shows the, kind of basically how much by accident this actually happened. And so I started an internet startup back then, a marketplace for used rare and out-of-print books with people from the chair, like the professor institute that I wanted to join as a research assistant and PhD student, and they kind of asked me whether I would like to join so I did. Yeah, that was and I never left, and that was like more than 20 years ago, and I never left the scene since then. Yeah, but it was not by at all like a conscious choice or whatever. It was really by accident.
So you joined the first venture then more as a project, it seems, a university project. And so do you remember which role you joined and kind of what it felt like then starting in this kind of interesting thing in the early internet days?
Yeah, I mean, I think there was one very interesting learning for me. I was supposed to be kind of the internet guy, yeah, because back then not a lot of people knew about how that actually worked, yeah. So me included, but I had a pretty strong affinity for this, and so I was doing online marketing back then, or digital marketing already, because I was probably the closest to that topic. We were 5 founders, which was probably a little too much, to be honest, but it was a really good team. I mean, also by standards today, it was a really good team. But my key learning back then was, and I think that's also something that I tell founders today as well. It's I really like I was committing to like build up one key skill, in that sense, online marketing or digital marketing and web analytics, it was called. Today you would probably call it business intelligence. Yeah. So I mean, web analytics would just be a small part of that, but that's basically what I did. And that never left me. I mean, I always like built a lot of my career that I built from then on was built on having at least one core skill that's also operationally relevant. In my case, that was digital marketing. Obviously, that could also be product development, or it could be IT, or it could be sales. But I basically said I don't want to move directly into like this general management strategy kind of stuff. Yeah, but really having like one core skill that's operationally relevant. That always helped me. And that always helped me to get into good constellations also later on, yeah, because I had something I really stood for. Yeah, I mean, obviously not in 1999, but like a few years later, I really had the skill of, okay, this guy, he's a smart guy and he's nice, etc., but he also really knows about this digital marketing stuff, and that really helped me.
And you absolutely had that reputation. I remember in those Berlin days, mid-2000s, when you asked, like, who's the one to ask about like performance marketing? Back then it was not even called like that. And so then your name came up,
Yeah.
So They actually don't know. So it's kind of as well interesting to be early in the game and early learn. How did you learn about performance marketing?
I just did it. Yeah. So I mean, I just tried out things myself. I mean, back then, and also during, later on, I worked at Rocket also as a managing director. But even then, I really tried to stay fairly close to what's happening operationally in online marketing. And the best way to do this is doing it yourself and exchanging thoughts and views with others that are doing it themselves. And that has always been my main kind of learning channel. It has not been like reading books or whatever on a topic, but it's always been trying out things and staying close to people that try out things. Yeah. And then trying to be a valuable exchange partner for those people. Yeah. So, and I think that's also something that was a key learning. So I tried to stand for something, build up relevant know-how in something, and I was always willing to share that knowledge quite openly. Yeah. So, and that led to other people telling me about their ideas in that field quite openly as well. Yeah. So, and that again, like enhanced my own learning experience. So I think that was a pretty clear learning. Like build out the build out a certain know-how yourself, talk about it, and get other people that are really thinking about this stuff as well, and like be in a close exchange with them. And I think that's basically something that that helped me a lot. And I always try to, and that's like nowadays, I really try to encourage the companies that I invest in or that Project A invests in, really try to encourage them to be really experimental in this area. And I think that's not just digital marketing, that's everything like related to digital. The cool thing is if you have an experimental culture, you can learn a lot by just looking or observing actual behavior of people. And I think that's a great thing about digital, that a lot of things that people do or users do or customers do, you can instantly observe and draw your conclusions from it. And I think that is I think the best and most objective way to learn things. And I always enjoyed that a lot. And I probably, and that is probably also something where I again like got a little bit lucky. I'm probably a person that can look at user behavior or user behavior derived stats, and it tells me something.
Yeah, I mean, imagine the story behind the numbers, basically.
Yeah, and that's probably. I mean, if you observe this kind of skill, I think that's something. Yes, you can also learn it, but I think it's as always, you need a little bit of talent or access to it just naturally. And I think I recognized that I had this kind of, okay, I look at numbers related to user behavior or campaigns or whatever, and it actually was pretty clear to me what was like the next best step based on that.
I can see as well, no, you had the passion and the interest, no, to find and learn more.
And I think that's like a key thing for an entrepreneur to think about or try out. I think you also have to try that out. What's the kind of operational area that you're really good at? Yeah. And where you can build the special skill, because I think that helps you a lot to be relevant also for other co-founders, to have a reputation with VCs, to attract also good talent. Yeah, that's also another thing. And so I think it helps you to stand for something, but it's probably also personality related. I just feel a lot more secure if I'm on grounds where I know things about. Yeah. So I mean, there's other people that are, I would say, universally self-confident.
Strong egos, we call them at times.
You can also call it strong ego. I'm not that kind of person. So I am more a person that needs, like, you know, a solid fundament, so to speak. And then I'm also confident, but for me, that's not universally. So for me, it always helped to have this basis. But I think that's also personality-wise something that you have to check or find out. Are you this kind of universally self-confident person, or are you somebody that needs this kind of, you know, basis where they can always draw on and go back to, where they know if, you know, worst comes to worst, that's where I'm really an expert.
Which is fantastic too. Now, if you see the ventures not working out potentially, so then you can say, hey, I have this skill, I can always go back at least for some time, help somebody else in starting their ventures. And so when it comes to them preparing maybe for this learning, and I find this theme extremely interesting because many people out there, it is a confidence game, and you need to gain this confidence to actually make it real. And so maybe started working in a functional area, preparing yourself, becoming kind of like the expert or the one that has seen quite something and experience in a space. At times I don't like the expert word too much because there's too many self-proclaimed kind of experts as well out there. But by really having the know-how, I think can be a great preparation for making it real then in the second step.
And also being like a good partner for others to approach you. Yeah. So if I think that's also, I mean, it's not only you about having an idea or whatever. It might be that others have a great idea and they want to form a team and they approach you. Yeah. So and I think that's also something. I'm a creative person, I think, but I'm not the best kind of guy coming up with great ideas. So to be honest, in most projects that I've done so far, it had been others approaching me whether I would like to join. And then I said, yeah, in some cases I said no, some cases I said yes. And I think that's also something one shouldn't underestimate. If you have a clear positioning of yourself, today you would call it personal branding, yeah. Obviously not based on, LinkedIn personal branding type stuff that you sometimes see. I think that you were also referring to, but like true expertise and true excellence. Then others will probably also, like, opportunities will open up to you because other people approach you.
Yeah. Definitely, no, and it's a small word, and word gets around quite quickly in the small, let's say, entrepreneurship world as well, then, no, of who has really substance into it. And so maybe a last question on this: how do you prepare yourself for a launch, for making it real? Then what would you say is the best way then to learn on your own project? Oftentimes learning, if we take your role in especially like in performance marketing and working with the data, is it better than to maybe join a company that has a lot of funding, where because you have greater funds you can just run way more experience? Or would it be the same if I start my own venture and I just try in a bootstrap way, most likely with very little money? Which option of these two is the general answer an advice that you could give to people?
I think it depends on how you learn best. Yeah. So for example, I learn best by trying out things and observing. Yeah. There's others, and I think that's probably a little more universal, that learn most if they work with other people they can learn from, or that put them in situations where they can learn from. And I think that's probably my recommendation. If you don't have an idea yourself, I think it's always, if you have the confidence and if you have a good idea, I think it's always best to start yourself and then just work your way through. I think nothing beats the learning curve of doing your own thing. Yeah. I don't know so much about this bootstrap thing, because the problem with this bootstrap setting is it often covers a lot of the learning opportunities with like existential threats that you have to work on all the time. Yeah. So if it's really about it, it's also a great learning experience, I think, but not so much to build deep sector or area expertise in product or IT or whatever. Yeah. So it often, it's also a very interesting experience. And I think it can also lead to a good entrepreneurial career. But I think what I was trying to describe, this based on a certain fundament in a certain functional area, I think the best thing is really to join somebody in an ideally not too big company where you think that they have the best expertise in that area.
Where would you say the optimal size of that is?
It shouldn't be like if you join Zalando marketing team today, for example, yeah, that's probably not the best way to learn it, yeah, because they've been running it now for 10, 12 years. A lot of things are automized. It's very hard to get an overview. The sophistication level is quite high. Yeah, so I would say it's probably, if you join a company that's like in a Series A-ish type setting, that probably just has found the product market fit, but still working on it, because I think that's when really the implicit learning curve is, or the generation of implicit knowledge is the highest in every area, not just marketing. Yeah, I always observe that if you want to know if you want to, or if you want to hire people that know something about, let's say, marketplaces, yeah, you cannot hire somebody. I mean, not per se, but not in general, but in a lot of cases, that has worked for eBay 2015 to 2020, yeah, because most of the implicit knowledge generation of how a marketplace works has been relevant like 10 years prior to that. So a lot, so and I think I would always try to work with people like About You, for example, 4 years ago, you know, where they had been in the market, you saw, okay, there's things happening, they're working on this influencer marketing stuff that's really innovative, that just launched a really cool mobile app. So learning how, you know, customer reactivation works with mobile app, they were like one of the first companies to do that. So what I would do is I would choose a fairly small company, Series A, that's funded okay, because you need an okay funding in order to do what you exactly said, like spend some money, experiment. That's what you need as a basis for learning, and where you have an architect in the area you want to learn from. Because for me, a lot of people talk about IT architects, yeah. So that's kind of a common thing, but I would argue that in every area, whether it's logistics or customer service or product or marketing or BI, there are people that are architects, yeah, that structure the way that systems are designed to support a certain function, and that structure the processes around it, and that build the organization to run it in a perfect way, yeah, and that's why it's sometimes misleading, yeah. So just going to a great company doesn't
It has a
always,
big name. Hmm?
it's a big name, and you think, oh, they must be doing everything all right. And if you look closer, my feeling is, I don't know, I mean, that's actually something one should probably take a look at scientifically. My feeling is that most great companies are great because they're really excellent in 2, 3, 4 areas, but not in the 15 areas in total. Yeah, for example, Spotify, I still perceive them as pretty bad in CRM and marketing. Yeah, they're great because of the product. They can have shitty marketing, and they do have shitty marketing. I would say they have shitty marketing. Or Uber is not a great company because of their marketing. Yeah, it's like, you know, they outsource a lot of it, and they have like app download. So you would think, wow, if I join Uber, they really know how to do marketing. I would say no, that's simply not true. Yeah. So you might have people running around in the marketing department of Uber with big egos because they spend 2 billion euros per year, but that doesn't make them excellent. Yeah. So I think that the thing is really trying to find excellent architects in that area in a fairly small setting where you can really learn a lot and get the right kind of spirit. And get the right kind of thinking, because I think that is what great architects are really, what makes them stick out. They have the right guiding principles for a very specific area, and I think very few people do that. And even if you talk to people like at Amazon or at Facebook or whatever, they will also tell you, even at such companies, there's in fact very few people that really, you know, decide on the guiding principles of what makes a company great in a specific area.
They know all the playbooks and how the processes and what it actually takes and where the differences are as well, and the different can see that. Perfect. Maybe going as well through your Vita a little bit to see and get the background. So we see you there. In a sense, building up the marketing, the business intelligence for selling basic books, used books as well online. How long did you do that for?
Just for 3 years, 3.5 years, and then the company, we were acquired by a Canadian company, basically doing the same thing, AB eBooks, and then later the combined company was sold to Amazon, and I still had like my shares until the end. And actually, my two co-founders, or two of my co-founders, I mean, another co-founder is today a professor, you know, like Malte Brettel in Aachen.
Yes.
and two of the other co-founders, they were with the company like for quite long, and actually also joined Amazon afterwards, etc. So they were taking over the Canadian company in terms of being CEO and COO. But I didn't want to do that, and I actually joined Malte not in Aachen back then, but in Leipzig actually, to do my research assistant thing. So after 3.5 years, I returned back to university, and that was in 2002. And so you might remember that was kind of, you know, the dark
the bubble,
days.
yeah.
The bubble had just burst. I think the DAX went down from like 8,500 points to like 2,000 or something within 1.5 years. So it was like, yeah, if you think about it, it
The
was
German
really,
index just crashed. Everybody was said the internet is dead. It was so hyped.
yeah.
There was just people wanting to make money, but there's no substance to it. Right? There was this
I
kind
mean,
of
there
in
was also
between.
fraud. Yeah, there was also a lot of Wirecardish type fraud happening. 120 venture capitalists, I think 95% of them kind of died over the 2002 to 2004 period. So that's when I went back to university and then tried to, or did a PhD, and then tried to also start like in German you say Habilitation. So like, you know, this
Preparing. Sorry.
Like trying to become an assistant professor and then a real professor. And that's when, and then 2006, I started doing angel investments again. Yeah, so the Germany, internet Germany recovered. And then in 2007, Oliver Samba said, "Oh, you don't do this university stuff. It's a waste of time. Do something that's meaningful and where you can have impact. And nobody gives a shit about this doctor thing. So why don't you join Rocket Internet?" And I said, oh. And that Rocket had just started like 2 months ago. And so I said, yeah, okay, I'll try it out. And I discussed with Malte and I said, Malte, I'll try it out for a year. And if it's not good, I'll come back. And yeah. And then that was 2007. And then I joined Rocket. And that was fascinating, to be honest, because Oliver had quit Yamba, which was a horrible company, but you could learn a lot from it. I also had been with Jamba as like a consultant. He had left Jamba 2005, and then he started doing investments with his brothers, like in a VC and angel type format. And then he basically said, "I'm frustrated by these entrepreneurs because they don't do what I tell them to do. Yeah, they do what they want to do themselves." And so why don't we come up with this incubator thing where we, you know, where basically the role of the entrepreneur is kind of reduced. And we copy concepts that work, and then we put an operational staff on it that knows how to do that stuff, and then we just execute. And then we hire somebody from McKinsey or Goldman or Harvard or a combination, and then we let them run the companies, and they also get some equity for it. But essentially, we tell what's happening here, and that was kind of the Rocket idea. Yeah, and that was it worked very well in the beginning. And I think if you look at it also in hindsight, I mean, HelloFresh and Zalando and I think Rocket earned like, I don't know, 4.5 or 5 billion euros with that. And if they would have stayed in the businesses, I mean, if you look at HelloFresh today, 50% of HelloFresh, which Rocket owned at IPO, would be worth 4.5 billion alone. And I think the 30 or 40% they had in Zalando in the end would be 7 billion today. Yeah. So I think if Rocket would have just stuck to the businesses or to the shareholdings until today, it would be a 12 billion company with, regardless of everything else. I mean, there have been other good things as well. Yeah. So
and those were the first ventures then kind of that were launched as Rocket Internet?
No, I mean, Zalando was started in 2008. But the German Care.com, Betreut was one of the first.
Was
Top Tarif, which was like a Check24 kind of, that was launched quite early. eDarling was launched in 2009, which became Spark Network. So, but Zalando was one of the first. Yeah, I think like within the first 10, and HelloFresh was in 2011. Yeah.
And were you then sitting together with Oliver Samba and the Zambas and then all in one room and then deciding, hey, let's do this? How many did you launch back in those days? Because I think this was as well an extremely exciting, like entrepreneurial time to launch all these, what then later became this quite big success and really shaped the European, I would say, entrepreneurial ecosystem. How was that all decided? Which ones got started, and how, in what order and how quickly?
Yeah, it's like Oliver concentrated a lot actually back then on European Founders Fund, which is kind of the predecessor of the Global Founders Capital. So, and that was kind of the focus of the Samva activity until Lehman Brothers. So until like September 2008. So for the first 1.5 years of Rocket was kind of us, 4 or 5 managing directors, doing smaller incubation projects. Yeah, and Oliver was involved, but not so much involved because he focused a lot on investing the money of United Internet, basically through the European Founders Fund, into US tech ventures. Yeah, back then they were like invested in LinkedIn and in HomeAway etc. So that was the focus until Lehman Brothers, and then the focus shifted to Rocket, also of Oliver. But back then, Oliver did not have an official role at Rocket. He was a shareholder, the major, with his brothers, and he took most relevant decisions, but he was not present there. But how was it decided how to do ventures? It was quite a simple process. I mean, basically, we looked at successful business models around the world, and then decided to do something, yeah, based on pretty basic analysis. And then if somebody gave us money, and that was usually Martin Weber from Holzbrink Ventures, or today HV, if he put in money, then it was tried out. Yeah, that's also how Zalando started. I mean, it was basically, I think Zalando, the first thing was like 600,000. And back then, one has to say that Robert and David, the founders of Zalando, they had a much more like instrumental role in getting this started than. And also Steffen Zoller from Betreute, he was also like, back then, like the first ventures at Rocket, they were more founder-led than what happened like in 2009 to 2014 or so. Which was kind of, there was a
factory, and so yeah,
that wasn't the case. So that was kind of a co-founding with people, but the actual decision-making process, I mean, it was basically, would Martin Weber or later Schinnewick, would they ship in the money? And then in the beginning, it was like 400,000 or 500,000 euros they had to ship in, and 150,000 coming from Rocket. And when they did the 500, we did the 150,000, and then the thing started, and then we saw where things are going. Yeah, I mean, that's what. So it wasn't that much of a deep analysis or discussion or whatever. It was usually calls, so we didn't sit together very often. So like this whole work from home thing.
Really, like back then, there must be Skype or something, the early versions. No, yeah.
Yeah, or just telephone.
Just okay.
Yeah,
conference calls.
Conference call. Oliver's management style is just one conference call after the other. I mean, also the way that like he did like Groupon and things like that was all. I
heard about those daily daily conference calls with all the country managers as well, and so. But I imagine as well. No, at the same time, you are let's say a team of 4 or 5 managing directors of managing the Rocket Internet. I guess the playbook just had to be in a way developed. Which process, and so. There's a ton of opportunity as well of business models that are coming up, especially in those let's say around 2008, 2009, where a lot of the consumer web was started, platforms were starting, lots of potential role models to take, for, let's say, especially in the US, that had a lot of traction. How did you determine which ones then you would actually do, and as well, which ones you would not do?
I think a lot of the stuff that was done back then was, as you said, consumer focused, e-commerce heavy, or things like dating, where online marketing and product know-how, but in a shallow sense, I have to admit,
transactional kind of maybe.
Where they kind of played a role. So if digital marketing, and we had a strong competence on digital marketing and the BI around digital marketing. And then it was like, sure, we had to do like the operational piece behind, but there was nothing about what you see today, deep tech or technical elegance of the underlying kind of infrastructure or something. That was not so much the focus. And also one has to say, and that's probably, if Oliver has one weakness, that's probably this, that he has a very limited appreciation for the elegance of technology, or the elegance that technology can have if you do it right, and also the power that it can have if you really want to build a substantial company. And I think Zalando recognized that. I mean, Zalando was started as a B2C kind of shallow internet play, with obviously logistics behind it, but it really turned much more into a tech company later, because Robert kind of recognized this, although he's not a technical person, but he understood the relevance of like superior technology and user experience based on superior technology, because that's the only way you can really get into like a customer relationship based on a superior experience. And I think he recognized that, but that was not our mantra. So for us, it was really, if it's B2C, if online marketing played a decisive role, and also models where funding mattered. So in a sense where, because Oliver was probably the best guy back then to organize money. in Europe. Yeah? So from the Steenbeck family or Schinewig, or people like Len Blavatnik, the guy that's funding DAZN today, the sports app, which also requires lots of money. Holzbrink, Tengelmann, people like that. And he was good at activating this money. And I think that has been a key strength. And the players that played alongside him, I mean, like Tengelmann, etc., they fared very well during the first 2 years. Also, a lot of the success of Holzbrink that you see today, or that has enabled them to get to the point where they are today, also can, or at least partially can be attributed to following Oliver or supporting Oliver in a lot of what he did back then.
Could we say that kind of like the playbook to some extent as well was, okay, this is a big category, this is coming up, we know that the business model as such works, we'll have one of the deepest pockets in Europe, meaning if we have the same, let's say, customer acquisition cost, roughly speaking, then it's all about us deploying the money and we'll be number one and then we'll sell it to somebody.
Yeah, I mean, that was kind of the rough idea. I think what we underestimated, and that worked, yeah, in certain categories. And like Zalando, it worked, HelloFresh, it worked. So I mean, that's enough in venture. And I think that's, in a lot of instances, it didn't work. And I think what we underestimated in a certain way, or what Rocket underestimated, is exactly this power of technological elegance, yeah, that you can have, of design, yeah, so and also of true entrepreneurship. I think bringing an artificial constellation, or creating an artificial constellation, with all these pieces, bringing that together, and expecting kind of the entrepreneurial drive in that company be the same as if you have a founder-led business. It's not that easy to replicate that in a certain way. And if you look at the successes, like Zalando or HelloFresh, there were always extremely entrepreneurial people driving it in the end. Yeah. So plugging people in artificially is something that can work. Yeah. And I think you see that also in the PE kind of sphere. Once a company is running well and has reached a certain level, and you have a lot of explicit knowledge in the organization, then I think it can actually work. Yeah. But I think bringing, generating this implicit knowledge in the beginning, and really getting this product market fit right, and developing the right product and technology behind it, that's getting more and more difficult, especially if it's not so shallow models. Yeah. So than we had back then. And also, I think that the skill sets that you need in today's world, with more technology and product focused businesses that you see rising, the variance in necessary knowledge is also much higher. Yeah. So it's much more difficult to have like an operational unit that supports these kind of businesses in such a holistic way that we needed it. Yeah. So I mean, that's also one of the characteristics at Rocket back then. A lot of the businesses needed this very similar capability set. And I think that has changed tremendously with the internet landscape, or the business model landscape being a lot more diverse, being a lot more focused on B2B. So you need much deeper expertise. Yeah. So I think a lot of the things we did back then had in common that if you were smart, you could get into things within a few months, and you were one of the experts. And I think if you have more technical stuff, more deep tech stuff, more product focused stuff, that is, especially in the B2B space, the knowledge barrier is just a lot higher.
Which I think is great news. Like what I take you for people that want to make it real on so many dimensions. One is you don't have to take it to the very end as well. Once you build up a company that has a certain size, maybe there are other people as well who are much better to take it to the next level. So no, if you see yourself as the core skill to start things as well, I hear as well in the B2B and in certain tech areas, and it will be interesting as well to hear how you see the markets, how they evolve. But as well, to some extent, if you have an engineering and tech background and you have a passion for, let's say, deep domain knowledge, then you don't get the cruel kind of competition from people that just pour a lot of money, destroy your click prices in a way, and you're kind of left without anything, no? Which in certain markets has happened, maybe.
Yeah, yeah, and also, I mean, the detrimental effect of Google, Amazon, and Facebook isn't that strong. Yeah, that's also. I mean, it's not only, yes, it's also other people that are well funded that are, you know, imposing competition on you, but it's also just the logic how Google, Facebook, and Amazon works that will lead to an uphill battle when you are in consumer, or at least an expensive battle when you're in consumer, just because the way they are designed as auction systems that control customer journeys, and they will let you tap into customer journeys and influence them, but you'll have to pay for them. Yeah. So and I think the truly successful business models in the B2C space, they are able to generate or to create customer loyalty, which basically is nothing else but customer journeys that directly come back to you without Google and Facebook interaction or Amazon interaction necessary. Because the moment you need a lot of Google, Facebook, and Amazon interaction, it just becomes extremely expensive. Yeah, the capital efficiency of what you do goes down, and that's not the case in B2B necessarily. I think there you can. It's much easier to differentiate yourself sustainably, and I think what's also great, and I think that is something that has fundamentally changed over the last 5 years. Your access to capital has increased, or has basically improved incredibly over the last few years. And if you see that with a company like Pipedrive, that is like founded in Estonia, and they are able to attract an investor like Bessemer or Atomico, and it doesn't matter. Yeah, we also just invested in another company in Latvia, and it's something that we do now, and we see like Sequoia is very, like all US investors now are very active in Europe, also at a pretty early stage. So, and especially if you have deep tech expertise and have built something great, you'll find it's much easier for you to find investors now for this kind of stuff that you don't have to bootstrap if you don't want to, for such a long time. And I think that is also great news. I think the only thing you have to get going for you, and I think that is what you often what's often missing. And I know it's like an old saying that Germans are not sales oriented or whatever, but the sales piece or the sales component is something that people then often underestimate. I mean, products also in the B2B space don't sell themselves automatically or just by the pure elegance of the product. You need to package it, and you need to have the right kind of storytelling around it to attract investors, but also customers and also people to work for you. Yeah. So yeah.
Let's look into that as well as the final stretch as we're approaching as well. We have a few minutes left here. You then switched as well from the Rocket Internet. You started Project A together with a few partners from actually the start of Rocket Internet. Maybe a little bit about the why. Why did you then decide to in a way, switch the sides or so to say, okay, now we're becoming as well more of an investor role, or as well, you actually had the company building part too, a very, I think, active part early on, especially. What was a little bit like the logic behind the switch now from these early Rocket days of starting, massive success stories to saying, okay, we split, we're going to start our own venture?
Yeah, I basically said, or we said back then when we started Project A, we said, let's do something by ourselves if we reach a scalable kind of setup, or setup that has a critical mass in terms of funding that we needed in order to work in a professional way. Because the cool thing at Rocket was you could really work in a professional way because it had a lot of funding, big funded companies, so you could do cool things if you wanted to, like in a marketing side, but also on other areas. So and we said basically, if we're able to achieve at least a certain minimum standard of funding that would allow us a certain level of professionalism, we want to do it ourselves. Why? First of all, I wanted to work more with founder-led businesses, because for me, what's driving me? For me, it's like really this thing I recognized quite early. I think that I'm a pretty good entrepreneur, but I'm not an exceptional entrepreneur. Yeah, so there's certain things missing, but I think I'm a pretty good or very good mentor and coach of entrepreneurs, and I have a lot of fun, basically, and a lot of joy and a lot of satisfaction in just seeing how others with like small contribution, sometimes larger, sometimes smaller contribution, or at least help from me, find the right kind of setup in an early stage and really develop a great business out of that. That's for me, that's the perfect role. Yeah, I don't need to be like first row or front row or whatever. It's completely fine to be sidelines, contribute a little bit, even if it's just mentally. That's great. And for that you needed true entrepreneurs, yeah, that want to really run their own show, and you can help them, but they're in the driver's seat. And that wouldn't have been possible at Rocket. And the other thing is, I recognized quite early that things are moving more technical and more and more substantial in terms of the business model and in terms of the technology needed. And at Rocket, we didn't. I mean, we invested a little bit into like B2B stuff that started slowly, but that's really the thing that Oliver really never wanted to do. And I think, and I was convinced already like 2011 and 12 that's where things are heading. Especially if you look at Germany with a small consumer market compared to the US or China. And if you look at Israel, you don't see any consumer startups out of Israel, yeah, for a reason, yeah, because it's all deep tech. And I also thought the smartest people in Germany, I mean, not per se, yeah, but the smartest people that we have, a lot of them, they study technical stuff, yeah. They become engineers or whatever sort. And that was a potential where I thought, if we can activate that, that would be awesome. And back then, that wasn't really activated so much. Yeah.
And I think it's still, to me, is now looking at Europe especially, and so there's an amazing tech talent. No? If we take Germany, the Max Planck's, the Fraunhofers, all the research institutions. But here, for example, I'm in Barcelona, in the UPCs and all the technical schools, amazing data scientists. And so, and I think there's still so much to do, not to, as you say, activate them, not to get them into having an impact, making it real, to them, create exciting companies that are maybe more deep tech as well.
Yeah. And I thought that couldn't be realized within Rocket. And then, like you had, a lot of things have been talked about, the atmosphere at Rocket, and I'm a very people-oriented guy. I think it's like, and if you work in an environment also where things are not as people-oriented as you sometimes think it should be, not because you like it this way or you're a nice person or whatever, but also because you think that's economically the better way to do that. Yeah. We just said, okay, let's try to do this ourselves, and I've never regretted that, to be honest. Yeah, so yeah.
I think we do have to make like a full session on the lessons learned as an investor side in Project A. But maybe if we take this transition as well first here, of starting your own company now, were you scared?
No, not really, but I mean, that's not really a fair comparison, to be honest. Yeah, because I mean, I had my first successes with like the sold AV ebooks. I'd done pretty good business angel investments like Trivago and things. So I was kind of, even if it would have failed, I wouldn't have, changed my life in any kind of way. And I think that is something, that's why it's not really a fair comparison to people that don't have this kind of background. I mean, I created it myself. I'm not coming from a rich family or whatever. Yeah, but I knew that no matter what I do, I will always find a place to work, and we can always live a few years, even if there's no money coming in. So I'm just going to try it. So I wasn't really afraid of it, because I knew there will always be other options. And I think that's a great thing. That's also a great thing about having this one base where you say, I can always become the CMO of something if things go worse to worse, and there'll probably be people that hire me or become an advisor in private equity or whatever. Yeah, so no, I wasn't worried about it. And I think once you start working on something entrepreneurial, you don't think about these things anymore. Yeah, because you're so caught up with basically the day-to-day and operational kind of work. And then things, moved in the right direction for us. I think I think we took a couple of right decisions on the investment side, and also on like which partners we partnered with. Like Otto Group was a great partner in hindsight to do this with. Like family businesses are often great partners, yeah, because they can think really long term. CEOs, or at least the family, doesn't go away, yeah, so you can really rely on them, because venture building or venture investing is like a long-term game. You need people with 10, 15, 20-year time horizon to be really serious partners, and that we had. And so I think in hindsight it was a really good setup. I mean, did we do a lot of mistakes? Sure, but it never was existential, and I think that's really the thing. And that's why I would also urge people to found businesses rather early also, yeah,
Because it
when
does
they don't
take
have,
time, these 10, 20 years maybe at
yeah,
times.
oh 5, 10 years, yeah. And
Mm.
if you have kids, and if you have a young family, and it's sometimes a lot more difficult, obviously. At least get into this entrepreneurial mode. I think once you've established yourself, it's a different story, yeah. But there's a lot of entrepreneurial talent out there. They basically say, oh, I bought this apartment now, and my kids are going to private school, and blah, blah, blah. So and then I need to earn 140,000 euros per year. So I don't have saved a lot of money. So and so I cannot really do something entrepreneurial. So I think getting into this quite early is not a bad thing to do, if you can, yeah. Because if you're free in your mind and you don't worry so much about things, that obviously makes things a lot easier.
Mhm. If we take the last two learnings or so, 2, 3 learnings, like in very brief terms, what would this be advice for founders that maybe are at the stage where they think about an idea and they're trying to figure out, should I really go all in? Should I make it real?
I think one learning is, if you don't go all in, it's very hard to reach, a setup that's really going to perform well. Yeah. So I think you need to, there's no steps, tiny step approach into
Just
successful entrepreneurship. I'm pretty much convinced. Yeah. So I think it only can turn out to be really successful once you really go in. Yeah. And I think that is one key thing. So you really should go in early. And another learning is, a lot of the businesses that I've worked with in the past did not work out, not because the idea wasn't great or whatever, but they worked out because the team setting became dysfunctional quite soon. Yeah. So it's really key that if you choose to work with people, first of all, they should be complementary, blah, blah, blah. There should be at least one tech person, but you should really be sensitive for the issue of complementary personalities and character. Yeah, because once you have an emotionalized relationship in the founding team and it becomes dysfunctional, it's extremely hard to become successful. And that you have more often than you think. And it doesn't always have to be like an open conflict. Yeah, it can also be that you have two big egos, and one ego gets a lot of the success, and or can speak to the press or whatever, and other people are not, other people in the founding team don't like it, and then you're in a dysfunctional kind of setting, and then you're kind of what people know from a political setting in corporates, yeah, where you move away from trying to be the best, build the best company possible, to other things playing a lot of like an important role, and that's definitely a setting you don't want to be in. And I had one other learning that I thought was key. Yeah, I mean, trying to work on a really relevant problem, the rest will come. Yeah, so don't do like, what's your total addressable market calculation or whatever. if you solve a relevant problem that people are very likely going to be willing to pay for, then that's fine. Yeah, I mean, if you the rest will come. Sometimes you create markets that are obviously the best companies. Yeah. So, but if you work on a relevant problem, or if you work on a relevant use case and provide something where you can really build, yeah, a superior experience, that's obviously great. And one last thing I would actually look for, I mean, that's often described about, but people often neglect it. The best companies, to my understanding or to my experience, have network effects. So if you want to build something really big, There has to be some kind of network effect. Yeah. And you have to at least, it's not always that easy to see where the network effect will be. Yeah. And you cannot design it always like from day one, but it's something I would be always very conscious of, because network effects has so many benefits if they really can be materialized and realized. And so I would just be sensitive to network effects, because they are probably the biggest value driver. Yeah.
Amazing. So we see the people thinking about that. How can I bring it network effects, or do I have some? No, in the business, we have more to learn from you. Certainly that we'll do in the future. Florian, thank you so much for taking the time today and share all these wonderful insights, and all the best. If people want to reach out to you, what's the best way?
By email. It's fairly easy. Florian.Heinemann@project, like with a C, slash, not slash, what do you call it? Hyphen. A.com. Yeah. Florian.Heinemann@projecta.com. Yeah, so it's fairly easy. And you can also try via LinkedIn, but there's lots of crappy stuff coming via LinkedIn. So I would probably prefer email.
LinkedIn is not your best channel, so they'll send you some emails, and we wish you all the best for now, and we'll definitely catch up soon.
I'm 44, so email is still something. Yeah. That's I'm still a pretty analog guy in a digital world, so email is probably fine. Yeah.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, and all the best going forward.